Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here with us today. This conversation began with the question, there's a lot being said about immigrants, but what's being said by our immigrant community? What are people living through right now actually experiencing? At Noticias para Inmigrantes, we have trusted relationship with 7 million subscribers and followers and reach over 10 millions of Latinos through digital media monthly. So we decided to get these answers directly from the voices of our community. We speak the language and know how to connect and communicate with this community at scale nationally through powerful social media tools. We want today to be about centering real stories, the voices of people living through this moment, and sharing insights from 2,072 Latino immigrants across the country who responded to our survey. We started asking ourselves back in January, how could we center the voices of our community in this moment? How could we better reflect what people are actually going through and create a safe space for people to share? Immigration Research Initiative and Noticias para Inmigrantes join expertise to make this happen. The research expertise, along with our deep community reach, allow us to field a large survey for Spanish-speaking immigrants across 47 states. If you took this survey to share your insights with us and you're here with us today, thank you so much. Our theory of change is simple. When we center lived experiences, we can shape the narrative, inform advocacy, and be responsive to our community needs. That's what we hope to do here today. In a landscape filled with chaos and disinformation, we want to share real stories directly from the community to inform action. Today's conversation brings together multiple partners who help shape this work. I'm Irene, Director of Growth from Noticias para Inmigrantes, an award-winning digital media organization reaching millions of Latinos monthly across digital platforms like direct messaging, WhatsApp, Instagram, email, YouTube, and TikTok. You also hear from Anthony, Senior Data and Policy Analyst at the Immigration Research Initiative, a nonprofit, nonpartisan think tank attentive to the immigrant experience in the United States. We also have Rocio Segura, Director of Digital Media, also from Noticias para Inmigrantes, who has her own immigrant experience and a strong connection within the Latino immigrant community. We acknowledge there's great work happening in our community and each effort builds on each other. So we'll also hear reflections from Hamilton Bernstein from the Urban Institute.
Hi, everyone. So I would like to start sharing that one of the clearest themes that emerged from this survey is something that we are calling a dual reality. On one hand, people shared experiencing fear, anxiety, and uncertainty. For example, one person told us, me siento perseguido políticamente, estamos pensando en irnos por salud mental. I feel like I'm being politically persecuted. We are thinking of living for our mental health. But despite the fear and persecution, people are still showing up. They are working, parenting, volunteering, adjusting routines, and finding ways to stay informed. There is a tension between the very real harm people are experiencing and the strength and care they continue to show up with every day. For many immigrants here today, this is not as surprising to us. Amidst adversity, we cultivate resilience through community, moving forward with purpose, never losing a momentum, through care, courage, and by supporting each other, because we are a community. Somos una comunidad. Anthony, would you share our research findings?
Absolutely, Rocio. Thank you so much. So just to provide a little bit of context, this was a survey of 2,072 Spanish-speaking immigrants that we conducted between March 14th and March 21st, just to provide a little bit of context about what happened in that week. The day that we released this, the day that the survey went live is the day that Columbia University activist Mahmoud Khalil was abducted, including and is still being held, even though he was a green card holder and his wife is a U.S. citizen. He now has a son who's a U.S. citizen. Just a few days later, despite a judge ordering the Trump administration to turn around planes deporting different groups of immigrants back to the United States, the administration defied the order and sent people to El Salvador. On March 20th, the Trump administration sent a new group of migrants to the U.S. military base on Guantanamo Bay, where so many of us know about the really horrific things that have happened at Guantanamo Bay historically. And of course, claiming without any evidence that they were part of a Venezuelan gang. And to cap that week off, we learned that the Trump administration revoked the legal status of 530,000 Cubans, Haitians, Nicaraguans, and Venezuelans with temporary provisional status. So this is the time period in which people were filling out the survey. And this is really important because when we look at it, when we look at the results, we see that 52% of our respondents said that they had been impacted, at least moderately, by the overall changes in recent immigration policy and the new deportation regime. At least 30% of those said that they had been extremely impacted. Another key finding that we found was that 53% of respondents faced at least moderate discrimination. That is when we asked about how individuals were experiencing or whether they had experienced things like daily discrimination, workplace discrimination. At least 53% said that they had experienced a moderate or heavy amount of discrimination. And 40%, so 2 in 5 of our respondents, said that they had been impacted in their capacity to go to work. Another area that we looked at in our survey was we asked about media consumption. And what we found is that 69% of our respondents expressed an increase in their media consumption over the 3 months since Donald Trump took office. So that tells us that people are keying in, they're trying to pay attention, they're trying to understand what is going on around us and what is going on and what might impact their lives. Now, what was really interesting is 72% of respondents said that the main place where they get their news was via social media. And we found that 31% of respondents expressed that news coverage they consume is at least moderately in favor of deportations. That said, this doesn't necessarily align with their own personal views, right? So very few of our respondents said that they were in favor of deportation. However, 31% of the news that they consume was at least moderately in favor of deportation.
I would like to share that what person told us. Escuché algo del paro humanitario, pero no sé si aplica a mí o a mi esposo. They are hearing terms, seeing headlines, but they are left wondering, does this even affect me, affect my family? What is happening? So the gap between information, access, and understanding is where people can fall through the cracks. And it's a place where this information can really take hold. And this is something that we see all the time in our work at Noticias para Inmigrantes. People are doing everything they can to figure things out, asking friends, watching videos on social media, following influencers. But a lot of what is out, there is no clear or accurate. Also, one person told me, it's better to be informed because that way we can help each other if something happens. I've spoken with friends who are still applying for asylum about having everything in order, printed documents, and how to respond if somebody asks us about our status. I would prefer to have more information about resources and what to do in social media than news that give me anxiety. And that is why, as Noticias para Inmigrantes, we just don't report the news. We provide tools, context, and resources so our community can act, plan, and protect what they have built. We create simple explainers and deliver them through social media platforms. For example, a short explainer like ¿Tienes parol? Esto es lo que debes saber. We start with what is this? Who is part of this? What they need to know now so they can map out resources to their personal needs. And I would like to share that our main strategy to connect with our community is that we just don't not translate information. We transcreate it. And this is powerful because this means that we deliver our message in the way that they can understand, using their same words. What is the slang? How they can understand tone and cultural frame. Because for us, information is not just power, it's solidarity, hope, and action. So something that I would like to share here for media advocates and funders is this a call to action. Let's meet our immigrant community with content that is accurate, clear, and centered in care.
Thank you for adding that context, Horacio. We also asked people how they had been impacted in their capacity to go to work. So as I mentioned earlier, 2 in 5 of our respondents said that they had been impacted in some way in their ability to work. That includes 36% of people with provisional status. So temporary provisional status means they have work authorization, they have the right to work in this country, and yet more than a third of those respondents said that they had been, respondents in that category said that they had been impacted in some way, whether it was in their capacity to find work or their sort of fear around going to work. And survey respondents said, when we asked more specifically how many days had people missed from work as a result of the new regime, survey responses shifted somewhere between as little as a few days to several months of missed work. And we saw that this was true not just for people who are undocumented, right? While 57% of those who identified themselves as undocumented were impacted in their capacity to work, this was also true for 36% of, again, temporary or provisional status holders and 36% of visa holders. So the visa holders are people who have every right to be here, have work authorization, and yet for some reason they had been impacted by the policies of the new administration in some way, shape, or form, right? Results also varied by state, where some folks were sometimes more impacted than others based on the political climate in that state.
This is powerful. This quote that one person shared with us is, aunque no tengamos papeles, seguimos ayudando a la comunidad. Even if we don't have a regular status yet, we continue to help the community. So, and this is part of the dual reality that we were talking in the beginning. So many of us have immigrated for different reasons, but part of our resilience has been learning to love and appreciate the opportunities that we have in this country. This deep appreciation pushes us to give back and recognize the true value that we bring to this as a community here in the United States. We are not only neighbors or coworkers, we are also professors, doctors, advisors, directors, and leaders making a real impact in the United States. Of course, I am not going to say no. The situation is difficult. This regime have targeted immigrants like us, our families, our friends, our coworkers, trying to sow fear and disrupt our daily lives. And yet, and this is something I'm always going to highlight to my community, in the face of that adversity, we rise, we reinvent ourselves. Our strength comes from our roots, our resilience, and the unshakable hope that we carry for a better future. It is remarkable. This is something that we need to consider with the people that we work, because while so many immigrants report fear around even essential activities, as shown in this research, the vast majority trying to continue to live their lives. So we are also trying to balance urgency with care. We don't want to overinflate fear, even though immigration news about deportation and ICE is everywhere in all the traditional media. Only 12% of those survived knew anyone who had encounters with ICE. So one person shared with me, I know that we are living through a hard time. It's something real. I feel like we are being targeted, but you know what? I left everything behind to be here. And I believe I can make it through. I came to this country just 2 years ago, not knowing a word of English, but little by little, I started to understand. I even enrolled in a paralegal assistant course in a community college, not just to learn the laws, but to help others too. And stories like this remind us of the courage, strength, and deep purpose that immigrants carried with them every single day in this country. In my country, we say, if we step back, it's to gain momentum and jump further. Si retrocedemos, es para tomar impulso y saltar más lejos. So, and this is something that in this reality, we see every day in our community.
So we also asked people about how they had been impacted in what we call in their ability to do what we call essential activities, right? This includes taking your kids to school, going to church, going to public spaces, and visiting the doctor's office if you're sick, right? Now, 45% of our respondents said that they were concerned about performing these activities. So that means that more than 2 in 5 were concerned with whether or not they should take their kids to school, go to church, visit public spaces, or go to the doctor's office. This shows, I think, first and foremost, that the sort of fear-mongering and the targeting of the rhetoric of this current regime has been extremely effective at creating fear amongst immigrant communities. But we also saw that many people have taken steps to protect themselves, right? So 21%, so that's 1 in 5 of our respondents said that they actually avoided some of these essential activities, right? Whether they avoided taking their kids to school, going to church, going to public spaces, or visiting the doctor's office. This shows obviously a deeply concerning finding, but also one that I think identifies how immigrants are trying to protect themselves in a very trying and difficult time. And we also asked about who are the most trusted messengers, right? Who are the people that immigrants trust when they're trying to get a sense of where they should, of how they should protect themselves and how they should feel in this time, right? So as I mentioned before, 69% of people reported an increased media consumption over the past 3 weeks. 72% said that they got their information from social media. 71% say that they personally oppose deportations. This is really important because there's this sort of really harmful narrative that people who have been in the US longer are more likely to support deportations. That is not what our data suggests, right? Our data suggests that anti-deportation views are consistent across the amount of time, the different lengths of time that people have been in the United States. And again, that 31% of people who say that their media coverage favors deportation tells us that there are many people who are maybe consuming news that might hold views that are different from their own. Where that news is and what those news sources are, we're not 100% clear on. But it is clear that there's a wide diversity in where people are getting their news.
So important what you mentioned, Anthony, and I would like to share that information matters. And our audience always express their gratitude about for being informed. I can share a couple of quotes. Yo creo que es muy bueno lo que hacen, informar. Le doy gracias a Dios por poner a personas como ustedes que nos orienten y nos ayuden. Gracias por toda la información y el tiempo que dedican a las personas que más necesitan información. They are really grateful about that. People are actively looking for sources that they can trust and in a place that is easy to access. So in our experience as Noticias para Inmigrantes, we take that responsibility really seriously. We push out content daily that is rooted in clarity, care, and truth, because our community deserves nothing less. We are also very serious about not adding to the chaos at this moment, so we don't amplify messages that could affect people's livelihood if they are not certain and verified. Diversifying how we reach our audience is important. For example, Messenger and WhatsApp provide a level of privacy and closed network that helps them engage more freely. On Instagram, we provide direct messages, links for more information, and TikTok or Reels on Instagram help us break down really difficult topics verbally and with a faith that they can trust. So we want to be present where our people are. This is part of our mission. The people we are serving aren't tuning out. They're in social media, showing up, scrolling, listening, and asking questions. But they are also being flooded with contradictory messages. Even when they see or hear something about policy, people are left asking, does this apply to me? What does this mean for my family? ¿Es algo para mi familia? That is why trusted messengers on social media matter so much. When people see information from someone they know on WhatsApp or in a short video or through a live Q&A, it hits differently. It feels more grounded, more relevant, and more actionable.
Thank you so much for that, Rocio. And as you mentioned, people are really active on getting their information from social media. They're also really active and eager to know their rights. And they're using social media as one of the primary sources for gaining information on what their rights are. This goes back to that narrative that we've been talking about how people are trying to protect themselves, right? So social media plays the biggest role in how immigrants are trying to get information about what their rights are in case they run into or have an encounter with immigration authorities, right? So 54% of people have read some form of Know Your Rights campaign on social media. Many people have also been attending workshops, talking to their friends and family about this, or getting information directly from other social media users. Now, 45% of respondents said that they felt confident, that they know their rights if they're approached by an immigration officer. I think this is a sign for those of us in the room who are activists or who run community organizations. This is one of those places where we can do better, right? If only 45% of people feel like they're really confident in their rights, that tells us that we can do better in reaching people and educating and informing people on what their rights are and how to exercise those rights in particular. And this leads us to a really key point on legal services, right? So 53% of our survey respondents said that they did not have access to legal services. This was worse in particular for undocumented respondents. 76% of respondents who identified as undocumented said that they did not have access to legal service. And this is really important because of detained immigrants, we know that 32% of immigrants who are represented by legal counsel actually win their cases, compared to only 3% of those who are unrepresented. So this is really important because it's something that we need to think about. Legal access or legal services are not necessarily guaranteed for immigrants, especially given the state in which they're being held or in which their case is being tried. So this is a place where we can really do more to protect people. For example, in Texas, 55% of respondents said that they did not have access to legal services. That's compared to 40% of respondents in California, 48% of people in Florida, and 59% of people in New York. So there are some key areas, particularly in places like Texas and Florida, where there are lots of immigrants. There are lots of dangers that immigrants face right now, and those individuals desperately need more legal services. And the needs are greatest, obviously, amongst undocumented communities. But that's not to say that that's the only place where people have needs, right? So 3/4 of respondents who identified as undocumented said that they did not have access to legal aid, but that was also true of 36% of people with temporary or provisional status, 34% of temporary visa holders, and even 38% of legal permanent residents. What was even more concerning, I think, was that 65% of respondents said that they didn't even know whether their state had a hotline to report ICE raids. So this is another one of those places where in a few states, there are hotlines and there are ways that we can report whether or not ICE or immigration authorities are active in our areas and in our communities. But those services don't mean much if we don't tell people about them and if they don't know to use those services. So this set of findings, I think, is really important for us to think about how we can better reach and educate our communities.
Thank you, Anthony. And I would like to add that this is more than paperwork. It's about protection, peace of mind, and making sure our families are safe. Immigrants are just not waiting around. They are learning their rights, preparing, are doing everything possible to look out for their loved ones. We have seen respondents tell us things like, I know my right, it's my responsibility, or I have read the Constitution. They are not waiting for the perfect moment. They are getting ready now. So as Noticias per Inmigrantes, we are helping by translating legal information into clear Spanish and sending it straight to people's phones, because it's where people they are. Through video, chats, pools, and legal services connections, we make sure people aren't left in the dark. And I would like to add that social media is powerful. Social media has become more than a tool. It's our lifeline, it's nuestro salvavidas. It's where we get clarity, feel seen, and support each other. That is why we report information that reflects our culture diversity, our values, and our stories. We have seen with our post on Instagram about asylum resources and hotlines. So for giving you a really quick example, the asylum post that we did has 5K total of shares, and the hotlines have 1.4K total of shares. Can you imagine this amount of people sharing this information? That means that our community shared over and over, because deep down, we are together in this reality. Somos una comunidad, no? Means that we lift each other up. When we share vital information with our friends and neighbors online, we are not just passing the news, we are protecting each other. In our diversity, sharing is our love language. So this is how we prepare, grow, and make our voice count. So we are sharing this resource by the National Immigration Project in the chat in case it is useful for you too.
Thank you so much for that, Josio. I think that's a really, really great point. And I think it's also worth pointing out how many of our respondents have experienced discrimination in the past 3 months. So we used a discrimination scale from Harvard that measures how people experience discrimination on a daily basis to create a metric of how many people had experienced low, moderate, or high amounts of discrimination. 54% of our respondents experienced at least moderate discrimination over the past 3 months, and that includes 22% who said they experienced high levels of discrimination. This varied from mistreatment for speaking Spanish to being told to, quote, go back where they came from. And respondents, I think what was really interesting is the way that people responded to this sort of discrimination. In some follow-up questions, we asked people to describe not only what they had experienced, but also how they reacted to those experiences. And in many cases, they talked about how important it was to continue to go about their daily lives and to continue sort of going to work, being part of the community, being part of the economy, in spite of the difficulties that they faced.
Thank you, Anthony. And I know that in some way we have heard about that. So one person said, I have felt rejected for not speaking the language, but this doesn't prevent me from being useful and productive at work. Another told us, I know I need to have courage to stand up myself. This data connects directly with me and my life as an immigrant. I came to this country 10 years ago without speaking a word of English. Maybe you can recognize that. It was so frustrating and overwhelming. I joined an ESOL class, the English for a second language, and I have this opportunity that changed my mind and my life. I met other immigrants, mothers, people working 2 jobs, some with a regular status yet, but who all share the same goal, to learn, grow, and build a better future in this country. Some of us come through tough neighborhoods where resilience was our only option to continue with our lives. And this is something I'm always going to highlight for my community. Today, as a director, I look back and I feel proud. I will do it everything all again and maybe even study harder, you know? So that journey taught me to deeply honor and respect the strength of our community. I'm sharing this because what is clear is that immigrant communities are not giving up. I am not going to deny it's a really difficult time, but they are standing up with care, with trust, and with a strategy. That is why it's important, the information that we share, all the organizations that we are in this work. So, a Noticias para Inmigrantes will lift those stories up. We are building platforms where people can hear, you are not alone. Whether it's in WhatsApp message or Instagram Live with different specialists or a video about your rights that is important, we are creating a space for dignity. Discrimination is real, but so is the power of our community.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Josio. That was so powerful. We also asked folks about how they behave politically in this time. And one of the key political actions that people are taking is they're using their voice, they're using their pocketbooks to voice their opinions and to voice their values. And rather than stepping back, immigrant communities are stepping into political spaces by taking action to protect their loved ones, advocate for their rights, and shape a future that's grounded in collective care and justice. One of the ways that they do this is by voting with their pocketbooks, right? So 45% of our respondents said that they shop at businesses that support labor rights. 22% said that they promote the importance of Latino economic power. 27% said that they try to buy specifically from immigrant, Latino, or Black or Asian-owned businesses. To another 27% said that they avoid businesses that do not support the community. 16% have participated in sort of a day without shopping or a day without immigrants. And 22% said that even though they hadn't participated in any of these behaviors, they'd like to learn how or start to participate in these behaviors. So this is a really great example of how Spanish-speaking immigrants are practicing solidarity through their everyday spending, intentionally supporting businesses that reflect their values and support their communities.
This is a really interesting data, Anthony, because earlier this year, we shared information about the day without shopping across our platforms. And we saw an interesting response from our community, while some expressed concern, rightly pointing out that many of these stores are workplaces for fellow Latino. What stood out most was the engagement. So one piece of content about this topic reached 80K views and over 1.3K shares. So this tells us something really powerful and interesting, is that social media is more than a place to scroll or review. It's a space where our Latino immigrant community can stay informed, take collective action because they share this information, and protest safely and creatively when we are affected. This is a reminder that our voices matter and that together we are a force for change. Also, since a lot of organizations are working with my community, I would like to share that beyond supporting small businesses and recognizing our economic contributions, one powerful value that we saw that unites us as a community, no matter our background, different opinions, or immigration status, is that deep commitment to protecting our children. We have seen how threats to kids' access to education, like what happened in Tennessee, bring people together. Even with our diversity, the idea that every child deserves care, safety, and opportunity sparks empathy and opens doors to honest and compassionate conversations. These shared value and advocacy are powerful examples of the deep sense of community and resilience that define us. The Latino immigrant community is a driving force in this country. Yes, immigration policies impact us, regardless the immigration status that we have, but they don't define who we are or limit what we can achieve. At Noticias para Inmigrantes, we will continue building strategies to meet our community where they are, to listen with respect, and to connect in our language, with admiration and pride, everything that they contributed in this country.
Thank you, Rocio. And now we're so grateful to be able to hear from Hamilton Bernstein at the Urban Institute. Her team released a study in December that aligns closely with what we're seeing, and she'll help frame how these experiences are playing out. Hamilton?
Thank you so much. I'm really honored to have been invited to join this conversation. Thank you to all organizers and to everyone who joined us on this call. So there has been so much that has happened as part of the administration's strategy to intimidate and overwhelm immigrant communities and the organizations that serve them in the last few months. And I'm just very grateful that you're doing this work of collecting data to highlight immigrants' experiences at this time of upheaval. Anthony, you painted such a strong picture at the top of the long list of immigration policies that had changed just in the week that you fielded this survey. And of course, we know how much longer that list has gotten in the intervening weeks. And so it's just so valuable to tap into immigrants' perspectives when so many changes are swirling around and causing harm and confusion. As Irene mentioned, we collected just a couple of these questions in a survey that the Urban Institute conducts annually, the Wellbeing and Basic Needs Survey. When we fielded it just in December 24, which was after the election, but before inauguration, we found evidence that immigrant families were already reporting concerns about day-to-day essential activities, like going to work, driving a car, taking their kids to school, and also that they were taking steps to protect themselves, like seeking legal assistance or making plans in case a family member was detained. And these fears and these reactions were impacting adults in mixed status families at the highest rates. But similar to what we heard here, where we saw that all immigrant families were being impacted, even those where everyone is a US citizen or has a green card. We can't really compare our numbers across these two surveys because of the differences in methodology, but I really think that this helps put the field in a position to start triangulating between multiple sources of information. I think the two surveys and others that have come out, they really strengthen the evidence base that's documenting how communities, families, and workers are being impacted by unprecedented immigration policy developments that are taking place. And I think even in this presentation, you were doing that triangulation very beautifully, weaving together the findings of this survey and the deep, nuanced knowledge that Noticias para Inmigrantes has through your ongoing engagement with and dedication to immigrant audiences. I'll share just a few reflections. So the results definitely align with our findings that immigrant families were concerned about essential activities like seeking healthcare, taking their kids to school, going to work. And you're finding that this was 45% of respondents saying they were concerned. Definitely makes sense in view of our findings back in December, before things really started going. I found it so great to see those additional questions on actual changes in behavior. With, as you shared, overall 21% saying they actually had avoided going to church, doctor's office, or taking their kids to school. I did wonder what that would look like if you narrow that more, say, to people with children. My guess is that number might look even higher. And I say that because some of your other numbers were really startlingly high. 40% of your respondents saying that the policy environment had impacted their capacity to go to work. 45% saying they stay at home as much as possible and avoid going out in public. Those are huge numbers, and they have huge stakes and consequences for those people and their families and their communities. Second, I really appreciate your emphasis on the resilience of immigrant communities and your emphasis on the fact they're continuing to live their lives, supporting their families, contributing to their communities, despite these threats and this upheaval on so many fronts. I'm intrigued by some of the differences you pointed out between states. So it felt like you're seeing respondents in California being maybe more knowledgeable about support resources like hotlines and maybe less impacted in their ability to work. And I think these differences across state environments, places that are cooperating with federal enforcement, you know, thinking of things like in the recent news about the arrest in Florida versus, you know, places that are protecting residents from this overreach and being threatened by federal action, places like Colorado or Illinois. I think it'll be really important to see how similar or different immigrant families' perspectives and experiences are in these different environments. So for me, there are lots of questions, but I have three moving forward. One, you got its status a little bit with the results, and that seems like an area where we definitely need more testing and more information. And so the question is, how do all these policy changes play out for families where immigrants have lived here for many decades, with or without lawful status, and for those new arrivals with humanitarian parole or temporary protected status that may be prematurely ended? Two, how is this going to play out across different state and local communities over the course of this administration? How far can protective state and local policies go in terms of cutting against the harmful psychological impacts, the toxic stress that has been documented of federal enforcement changes? And in states that are cooperating with federal enforcement, you know, how are those impacts different? Are they different? How are they different? And what is effective to reduce harms? And last, and this was mentioned earlier as well, what happens to the children in these families? What are the short and long-term consequences of their experiencing alongside the adults and caregivers in their lives these unprecedented policies and harms. So I want to say that more information on all of this is going to be really important to monitor, to continue building the evidence, changing the narrative, and informing the field. Thank you again for inviting me, and I'll pass it back to you, Irene.
Thank you so much, Hamilton. There's a lot to still explore together. So before we wrap up, we want to leave you with a few takeaways from what we heard today, from the insights and people who share their experiences and stories with us. Latino immigrants are navigating a difficult, often dehumanizing moment. The political climate, harmful policies, and daily uncertainty are taking a toll, from mental health strain to economic pressure to fear of ICE. These are not abstract issues. They're being felt in homes, workplaces, and communities every day. At the same time, immigrant communities are staying engaged. People are actively finding ways to make sense of the shifting policies, staying alert of misinformation and threats, and doing so while continuing to work, raise families, and protecting one another. And while many say they know their rights, knowing your rights is not enough when the system is built to exclude or persecute you. Fear doesn't go away just because you have a legal status, and information alone doesn't build safety. So here's what we're asking from everyone here today. Funders, invest in a long-term support, not just crisis response. That means supporting trusted messengers and people who are already turned to. For the media, please move away from sensationalism and fear-based narratives. Immigrants deserve to see their experiences reflected with accuracy and depth. Personalize your support to people's needs. Use simple language. Advocates, let this data sharpen your work. Continue to expand your outreach by leveraging these strategic insights. Use it to build strategies that reflect the realities people are facing. Our communities are already responding. People are organizing, learning, and they're also making choices rooted in care and clarity. We are and can continue to be part of what's impactful and helpful to our immigrant communities. We have time to answer a couple questions that we received from the Q&A box. The first one that I have here is about our sample. Anthony, could you help share a little bit about the people who answered the survey?
Absolutely. So the survey was administered in Spanish, online on SurveyMonkey. So this was available again online from March 14th to March 21st. We got over 2,000 respondents. We did actually have more respondents than we actually reported on. We used list-wise deletion to get rid of anybody who was under 17, was not living in the US, or was not an immigrant. So we looked specifically at immigrants. That got rid of about 43 respondents. And we wound up looking at 2,072 overall respondents. One of the things that we also did with the sample was, in addition to oversampling geographically to make sure that our sample looked as close as possible to the real population of Spanish-speaking immigrants in the United States, we also used a raked weighting sample. And basically what that did was it helped weight the survey responses to look more like the real population statistics based on gender, time in the United States, and there's one more. Don't judge me. I have to check the methodology section. Geography, sorry. So we used geography, gender, and and length in the United States as ways to weight the survey responses to look more like the overall US population or the overall population of Spanish-speaking immigrants in the United States. Thank you for that question. That was really fun.
Great, thank you so much, Anthony. And I have another question here. How are we seeing these findings affecting us in our lives and communities? I can answer that question and share some of my experience as a first-generation Latina immigrant living in Los Angeles. If you visit the markets in Los Angeles, one of the most popular, Los Callejones in downtown, usually what you see is like crowded markets. It's an area where people go shopping, clothing, jewelry, shoes, food with families, kids. But lately, what I've seen is that they're emptier. There's less people going and gathering together. And while having conversations with business owners, they say that the sales have slowed down as fears of deportations have grown. And this is very interesting and contrasting because meanwhile, while I drive down at the San Isidro Tijuana border, maybe even twice a month with my family this year, what I've seen is that the flow of people crossing in and out of the country has remained steady. There's still the line to enter the United States still stretch for hours. And there's the San Clemente checkpoint between San Diego and Los Angeles. You still see immigration officials' cars parked on the side of the road, but we haven't encountered them to be actively on duty working, or we haven't been stopped by them. So you would almost think that nothing has changed. But speaking with some of my local neighbors, they mentioned that the fear is still there, but they have to continue moving. They say we still have to go to work. We still have to take our kids to school. We have to continue living our lives. It's those conversations and the reassurance from schools that our kids are safe that keep people going, and despite the constant fear and the uncertainty that is circulating. So thank you so much to everyone who submitted your questions. We'll be sharing now a full report and this recording by email. We hope it will affirm the great work you are already doing or provide a spark for ideas you'd like to explore. It would be great if you can share the report and insights with your networks so more people can continue to center the voice of our community in their network. Thank you again to our partners at IRI and the Urban Institute, and to everyone who helped to make this possible. Stay connected with us. Our contact info is on the screen. Thank you for being here, and take care.